All right, let's jump right in. Today, we're looking back at a time when America's cities were, well, pretty much on the brink of collapse. And we're going to talk about the generation of reformers who rose up and decided to do something about it. This is the story of the Progressive Era.
So, to really get this, we got to set the scene. The Progressive Era, which ran from about 1890 to 1920, didn't just pop up out of nowhere. No way. It was a direct, and honestly, you could say a pretty desperate reaction to the absolute chaos that came right before it. And to understand what drove these reformers, you first have to understand the crisis they were staring down. The Gilded Age left America's cities in a state that was, to put it mildly, a total mess. Just try to picture it. This explosion of industrialization had created unbelievable wealth for few, but for everybody else, it came at a staggering cost. You had cities just choked with overcrowded slums and nasty tenements, crime and disease were basically out of control, and government, at every single level, people saw it as corrupt and completely useless, while these giant corporate monopolies were squeezing wages down to nothing and just crushing any competition.
So, when you're facing all that decay and corruption, where do you even start? What could possibly light a fire under people to fight back? Well, it didn't start with a new law or a political party. It started with a moral idea.
The real engine behind the progressive movement was this thing called the social gospel. It grew out of Protestant Christian communities back in the 1880s, and, it was a totally radical new way of thinking about faith and what it was supposed to do in the world.
And this, right here, was the core belief. The whole point of faith wasn't just about saving your own soul for the afterlife. No, it was a call to action, right here, right now, to fix the problems of this life. It was this powerful idea that demanded people look beyond themselves and take on the job of helping others, especially the poorest and most vulnerable people in society.
Okay, so you've got this new sense of moral purpose, this fire in your belly. But what do you actually do? How did these reformers try to fix things on the ground? Well, they started by building lifelines right in the heart of the worst city slums.
One of the absolute best examples of this was the settlement house movement, and the person you have to know is the incredible Jane Addams. She started a place called Hull House in Chicago, and it became this revolutionary model for urban reform that spread all across the country.
And I mean, just look at the scope of what they were doing. Hull House wasn't just a place to get a meal, it was a complete community support system. We're talking baths for people who didn't have running water, cheap food, childcare so parents could work, job training, healthcare, and even English lessons for new immigrants. It was a real beacon of hope and, more importantly, practical help.
But the reformers didn't stop there. A lot of them believed that a huge source of misery in the cities, everything from poverty to crime to domestic violence, could be traced back to one single thing: alcohol. And that belief sparked another massive crusade.
Led by fiery groups like the Women's Christian Temperance Union, the push to ban booze gained incredible momentum. What started out as a moral campaign quickly turned into a political powerhouse. They got prohibition laws passed in most states, and then the big one. In 1919, the 18th Amendment was passed, making alcohol illegal across the entire country.
Now, at the same time, you had all this social work and these moral crusades going on. A brand new kind of weapon was being forged in the fight for reform. And that weapon was investigative journalism.
They got a nickname, Muckrakers, and their whole job was to dig deep into the muck of society, all the corruption and greed, and expose it for everyone to see. They investigated everything from urban poverty to corporate monopolies, and their motto was simple: investigate, educate, and legislate. In other words, find the problem, tell the public about it, and force the government to fix it. And just look at how magazines like Collier's and McClure's did it. It's brilliant. Before you even read a single word of an article, you saw this shocking cover art. That image on the left, a skull made out of patent medicine bottles, it instantly tells you that something is deadly wrong in America. It was graphic, it was powerful, and it was absolutely impossible to ignore.
So, what exactly did these journalists find when they started digging around? Well, here's a perfect example of their impact. Ida Tarbell's incredible investigation, The History of the Standard Oil Company. This thing was an absolute bombshell. Through years of meticulous research, she laid bare the ruthless and often illegal business practices John D. Rockefeller used to build his oil monopoly. It sparked massive public outrage and led to serious calls to break up these giant corporations. So here's the crucial question. What did all of this, the settlement houses, the moral crusades, the muckraking journalism, what did it all add up to? The result was nothing short of a complete transformation of American government itself.
And let me tell you, this shift was truly revolutionary. See, before this era, the big idea was laissez-faire, basically that government should be hands-off and stay out of the economy and people's lives. Well, the progressives came along and completely flipped that script. They argued that in a modern, complex, industrial society, you needed an active, powerful government to step in and protect people from the worst parts of it. This wasn't just a small policy change. It was a deep, philosophical shift in what government was even for, and it set the stage for pretty much every major debate we've had about government's role ever since.
Because ultimately, the progressive movement proved that dedicated people working together could actually create real, lasting change. This wasn't just talk. The Muckrakers' stories about the disgusting meatpacking industry, that led directly to the Pure Food and Drug Act. The fight against monopolies, that led to trust-busting presidents like Theodore Roosevelt breaking up huge corporations. They fundamentally rewired the entire relationship between the American people and their government.
And that brings us to a really fascinating question for today. The central, driving idea of the progressives was that government could and should be the main tool we use to solve our biggest problems. Now, over a century later, as we face our own set of massive challenges, it's worth asking ourselves, is that still what we believe?